So you've decided to take your first Alaska cruise. That's amazing because you'll truly have an unforgettable vacation. But even if you sailed to the Caribbean or the Bahamas before, a cruise to Alaska is quite different. But don't worry, we have you covered because we've put together our list of the 25 expert Alaska cruise tips and tricks every cruiser needs to know in 2023 up next. Welcome aboard, cruisers. I'm Don B. from Eat, Sleep, Cruise, where we help you see the world one port at a time. And one of our favorite destinations is Alaska. We've sailed there multiple times with several different cruise lines. And we actually made an Alaska cruise tip video last year, but several things have changed. Plus, we have even more tips to ensure your cruise to Alaska is truly memorable. Of course, if you still have questions after watching this video, please leave them in the comment section below and we'll be happy to answer them. So let's dive in. If you're watching this video in early 2023 and you plan on cruising to Alaska this year and haven't booked your cruise yet, well, you better get planning. Most major cruise lines release itineraries up to 2 years in advance for the Alaska cruise season. And while any time is great to book a cruise, we always suggest booking as early as possible. The reason you should book early is to secure the best price. As specific sailings begin to fill up, prices will also go up. Popular room categories and locations book up quickly as well. Booking your cruise early, you'll have a greater selection of cabins, and you'll also get preferred dining times. Of course, this will also give you more time to pay off the cruise and to plan aspects of your trip. Now, when planning your Alaska cruise, you do need to budget appropriately. You should know that Alaska cruise vacations are a bit on the pricey side when compared to Caribbean cruises, so we don't want you to get sticker shock. Alaska cruise costs fluctuate considerably depending on a few factors. Those include the cruise line, the itinerary, and the time of year, which all weigh heavily on pricing. If you have flexible vacation time, choosing the right time to cruise to Alaska can have a big impact on your budget. So when planning, you do need to keep in mind that you'll be paying for things such as the cruise fare, airfare or transportation to and from the cruise port. And then there are additional costs such as shore excursions. But taking everything into consideration, we have found that a typical 7-night Alaska cruise costs somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 per passenger when factoring in all the costs. In the description down below, we link to our complete guide that helps you budget for your Alaska cruise. That way you know the true costs. Now, if you didn't already know this, Alaska is a seasonal cruise destination. This means you're only able to cruise to Alaska during select months of the year, which hopefully kind of makes sense. The Alaska cruise season generally runs from late April, early May, through the end of September. June through August is considered the peak season, while late April, early May, and September, early October are considered the shoulder season. When determining the best time of year to cruise to Alaska, you'll need to consider things such as the weather, wildlife, price, and crowds. Midsummer usually offers the best combination of average temperatures, rainfall amounts, hours of daylight, and wildlife sightings. While midsummer in Alaska might have the warmest temperatures and the most wildlife sightings, it also means increased crowds and definitely increased prices. Particularly July and early August are the busiest times to visit Alaska. This, of course, coincides with school breaks and summer vacations. These months are usually the most expensive to cruise to Alaska. Thus, one of our expert Alaska cruise tips and tricks is to cruise to the region during the shoulder season. This will save you money and there'll be fewer crowds. We've cruised to the region late in the season a few times now and still had a great Alaska cruise and saved a boatload of money. Another perk of sailing towards the end of the Alaska cruise season is the chance to see the Northern Lights. The aurora season is generally from the end of August until mid-April. Typically, you have a better chance of seeing the Northern Lights further north in Alaska, as cloudy skies are common in southeast Alaska. Still, you could get lucky. During the Alaska cruise season, the sun sets the earliest in September, where the skies are darkest, making for the most ideal viewing conditions. Over 1 million cruisers travel to Alaska each year. With that said, more and more cruise lines and ships are sailing in the region. From family-friendly cruise lines to luxury high-end cruises, to small ship adventure cruises, there's truly no best single cruise line or best ship in Alaska. Truthfully, it all depends on your travel party's preferences. Brands like Norwegian Cruise Line and Royal Caribbean offer more diversity for multi-generational families. With some of the newest and most innovative ships in the fleet cruising this region, these might be the best Alaska cruise picks for families. Carnival Cruise Line and Disney Cruise Line are also popular choices for family cruises to Alaska. Couples might want to consider Princess Cruises, Holland America Line, or Celebrity Cruises. In fact, Princess Cruises and Holland America Line have the most ships sailing in the region. There's also luxury cruise lines like Viking. While this trip might cost more, it does include a shore excursion at each port of call, beer and wine at meals, free Wi-Fi, and no upcharges for specialty dining. If you're an adventure traveler, several small ship cruise lines like Uncruise Adventures and American Queen Voyages also cruise in Alaska. With such a diversity of cruise ships sailing the region, even within brands themselves, you should review the cruise ship's amenities before you decide on one. Once you've narrowed down your search to a cruise line or two, compare the ship's offerings to find the one that's a good fit for you and your family. While the flashy bells and whistles on new cruise ships might be important for some, an Alaska cruise is really more about the destination. One of our expert Alaska cruise tips is to look for ships with good viewing areas, like indoor observation lounges. Also, consider whether the ship has an indoor pool or indoor amenities for your kids. While the weather is often warm enough to enjoy the outdoor attractions, that's not always the case. And as you'll soon find out, it does often rain in Southeast Alaska. The same is true about your Alaska cruise itinerary. There's no one perfect Alaska cruise itinerary. It does really depend on your travel party's preferences. The most common Alaska cruises are 7 days in length and are round-trip sailings that depart from either Seattle, Washington, or Vancouver, British Columbia. There are also one-way sailings that generally cruise from Seward or Whittier, Alaska, to Vancouver, British Columbia, or vice versa on northbound and southbound routes. Regardless of the itinerary you choose, popular ports of call you'll probably visit include Juneau, Ketchikan, and Skagway, as well as Victoria, British Columbia. Some ships also visit Sitka, Haines, or Icy Strait Point. Most ships also have at least one day of scenic cruising, where you'll sail past majestic glaciers and fjords. Perhaps the two most popular glacier cruising spots are the Hubbard Glacier and Glacier Bay National Park. You should know the difference before picking your cruise itinerary. And back on our blog, we have a complete article that gives you a breakdown between these two of the most popular cruise itineraries. If you're a first-time cruiser to Alaska, one of our expert tips is to stick to a traditional 7-day round-trip cruise. If you can find one that cruises through Glacier Bay National Park, we highly recommend that as well. The views are amazing. Your Alaska cruise will certainly be an unforgettable experience. With several days in port and scenic cruising with glaciers and fjords, what could be better? Well, more time to explore Alaska, of course. If you have the vacation time, and quite honestly, the finances, you should consider extending your Alaska cruise with a cruise tour. Many cruise lines sailing the region offer add-on land packages. These land portions can vary in length and visit more interior locations beyond the typical Southeast Alaska ports of call. With a cruise tour, guests can enjoy a scenic train ride, stay in a lodge, and visit some places like Denali National Park, Fairbanks, or Anchorage. Now, if all of this is starting to feel a little overwhelming, don't worry, our next tip is really here to help. Even if you've cruised before, we highly recommend using a travel advisor to book your Alaska cruise. A good travel advisor can help you decide on some of the factors listed above. And don't worry, we're not travel advisors, so we're not here trying to sell you something. But we always use one when booking our cruises. A good travel advisor can help you save money on this pricey Alaska cruise. In addition to helping you find the best deal, travel agents often offer additional perks that can be combined with any promotions from the cruise lines. These add-ons can include things like free specialty dinner, free gratuities, onboard credit, and more. Now, this next tip might be a bit controversial, but we're sticking to our guns and recommending that you upgrade to a balcony. Once you've picked your perfect ship and itinerary, you need to choose your cabin category. And we really believe that upgrading to a balcony in Alaska is worth it. There are many reasons to book a balcony on any cruise, but we find the splurge the most beneficial in Alaska. Yes, a balcony cabin will cost more than an inside stateroom or an ocean view cabin, though it's truly breathtaking to admire the natural landscapes from the comforts of your balcony on an Alaska cruise. You can be sipping hot coffee or cocoa while sailing past fjords, or be on the lookout for wildlife while getting ready in the morning. Stay up late in hopes of spotting the northern lights, especially if you're cruising later in the season. The possibilities are endless. Of course, if you decide not to upgrade to a balcony, there are still plenty of viewing areas around the ship if you pick the right vessel. For US citizens, a passport is technically not required for closed-loop cruises, and those are cruises that begin and end in the same US port. Thus, if you're cruising to Alaska round trip from Seattle, Washington, a birth certificate and government-issued ID are the only forms of documentation required. However, just because you don't need a passport to go on the cruise doesn't mean that you might not need one to enter one or more ports of call during your trip. For instance, you may need a passport for some Alaska cruise excursions. Shore excursions that visit Canada, like the White Pass Rail in Skagway, do require a passport to participate. And of course, if you're doing a one-way cruise that starts and ends in Canada, you're going to need a passport there too. So, regardless of itinerary or the shore excursions you're thinking of doing, one of our tips is to cruise the region with a passport. Depending on your embarkation port, you'll likely need to arrange airfare. You should also consider booking a pre-cruise or post-cruise hotel stay. While we always recommend flying in a day early for a cruise, it's even more important when cruising in 2023, given flight cancellations and delays. Plus, Seattle and Vancouver are both great cities that deserve some time for exploration themselves. You should check with the cruise line or your travel agent to see if there are any promotional airfare offers. Many cruise lines now offer packages that include airfare. This option also offers some peace of mind in case of air delays, as the ships will usually wait for you if you booked your flights through the cruise line. Now, when it comes to budgeting for your cruise, you've probably noticed already that an Alaska cruise is not cheap. These cruises can run double or more compared to a Caribbean cruise. Likewise, shore excursions and tours in Alaska can also cost you a pretty penny. This is especially true if you book some of the once-in-a-lifetime tours during your trip. When we think of one of our best Alaska cruise experiences, it was a helicopter ride to the Mendenhall Glacier. However, tours like this can cost $500 or more per person. The White Pass and Yukon Route Railway in Skagway is the #1 Alaska cruise excursion, and that costs around $140 per person round trip. Other Alaska shore excursions include float plane rides through the fjords, wildlife tours, zip lining, glacier exploring, or dog sledding. And depending on your appetite for adventure, all of these should not be missed. Thus, another one of our Alaska cruise tips is to budget accordingly for your shore excursions, so you don't miss out on these amazing experiences. Likewise, we always like having a game plan for each port of call. This often means reserving shore excursions and tours well in advance. This is especially true in Alaska. Since Alaska cruise for many is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, shore excursions do book up quickly. We never recommend you wait till on board the ship to book your shore excursions. And you certainly shouldn't wait until the actual port of call to book a tour. The last thing you want to hear is that the excursion you've been waiting for is already sold out. So we suggest booking your shore excursions well in advance. And of course, you can always cancel if something pops up. You can always check your cruise line's online planner, as most cruise lines will periodically run sales on items like shore excursions. Of course, you can investigate local tour providers and third-party tour vendors, as they often offer smaller group tours and cheaper prices. Of course, you don't have to book shore excursions in every port of call. Many of these Alaska cruise ports are walkable if you just want to explore the downtown area. Or, the cruise lines often have shuttles into town as well. But either way, you should have a game plan for each stop on your cruise port so you don't miss out on all the fun. Like your shore excursions, we also highly recommend that you book onboard packages and make any reservations required on the ship before boarding. This is one of the easiest ways to save money on a cruise. Some of these add-ons might include things like beverage packages, specialty dining, Wi-Fi, and other experiences not included in your cruise fare, like the spa. If you have a flexible dining option on your cruise, many cruise lines let you make reservations pre-cruise as well. Of course, if you plan to dine at specialty restaurants, we want to pre-reserve those too. prime dining times do fill up quickly. Don't get stressed out about packing for your Alaska cruise. Even though it's altogether different than what you'd typically pack for a Caribbean cruise, the time of year you cruise to Alaska will dictate to some degree what items you'll need to include on your Alaska cruise packing list. The type of shore excursions you book will also factor into what you need to bring. But regardless of when you cruise or what you plan to do ashore, the most important Alaska cruise tip is to pack layers. Given the fluctuations in temperature, which in our experience can range from 25 to 30 degrees in one day, you'll need plenty of clothes in varying degrees of warmth. Layers that can be easily packed and taken on and off during the day are preferable. It's also a good idea to pack a water-resistant day bag to easily store these extra layers when going ashore. And speaking of weather and packing, make sure to also bring a packable raincoat and some waterproof shoes or boots. Yes, it will rain during your Alaska cruise. If you're lucky, the rain will only pop up here and there. But Ketchikan is one of the rainiest places in the United States after all. Even if the day starts off sunny, be prepared for some fog and rain to eventually roll in. Don't let the damp weather impact your trip though, just be prepared with the right gear. But while you're putting together that suitcase, don't forget your bathing suit. While the weather is not exactly beach friendly, the pools and hot tubs on the ship are still open, as is the spa and thermal suite. You might even get lucky enough with weather to enjoy the outdoor pools. Clothing is not the only gear you should pack for a cruise. This trip is one you'll want to remember forever. While cameras on smartphones have come a long way in years, they won't do the scenery and wildlife in Alaska any justice. If you want great photos to last a lifetime, we recommend bringing a digital camera with a zoom lens. If you don't own one, you can always rent one. We rented a zoom lens for our camera during our last trip to Alaska, and I'm so glad we did. If you don't even own a digital camera anymore, you can also even rent that as well too. Likewise, you should invest in some binoculars for the trip. They don't have to be expensive, and honestly, you can also rent them as well, but a pair of binoculars is crucial when scouting out the area for wildlife. Now, you do want to check with your cruise line, because some premium and luxury cruise lines do provide binoculars in each cabin, or on contemporary cruise lines, some cabin categories include upgrades like binoculars. When not docked at a port of call, most cruise lines offer a variety of onboard talks and lectures. These are not your typical port shopping presentations, but rather they're enrichment programs that provide valuable information about the history, culture, and wildlife of the ports of call you'll be visiting. In our experiences, these talks are informative, fun, and educational part of your cruise, and should not be missed. The onboard naturalists and historians really make the cruise that much more enjoyable. Plus, if your ship is cruising through Glacier Bay National Park, a park ranger will actually come on board the cruise ship. He or she will offer a narration about the history of the park, as well as point out the several glaciers while sailing, and then later in the day often offers an informational session that's worth attending as well. While onboard enrichment, early morning glacier viewing, and long days in port, you might want to consider not purchasing a Wi-Fi package on your Alaska cruise. While internet on cruise ships is constantly improving, the signal in Alaska is not always the best. It can be impacted by weather and interference from landscapes. Further, most of your ports of call will be in the United States and likely covered in your cell service. Of course, you'll want to check with your provider's coverage area prior to sailing. If you do use your cell phone while in port, make sure to put it back in airplane mode once you set sail. You don't want to incur any expensive roaming charges while at sea, as your cruise ship will sail far enough away from land that you will lose cell service. Now, the food on the ship is always delicious, but when you're in Alaska, you should probably try to eat some of the Alaskan cuisine on land. This might mean you indulge in the plentiful seafood available. Salmon bakes and Alaskan king crab are some of the fresh local specialties that you should sample during your cruise. Of course, you'll need some beverages to wash down the food as well, so you might want to try a locally brewed beer. And there are some popular tourist stops that include the Red Dog Saloon in Juneau, Tracy's Crab Shack in Juneau, and the Red Onion Saloon in Skagway. There's also the popular Creek Street with shops and restaurants in Ketchikan. Of course, you can always check the Facebook groups or other online forums for other recommendations for local eateries. These 7 days will be packed, so you need to make sure to get some rest. you are going to do and see a lot during Alaska cruise, we want to make sure to also get your sleep. There'll be early morning calls into port and glacier sightings that will have you up at dawn. With the sun out until 10 p.m. during peak season, you'll also want to take in all the views until late in the evening, plus the potential to see northern lights. These early mornings and late evenings mean you should make use of downtime to squeeze in a few extra hours of shut-eye whenever you can. This is one adventure you don't want to miss. You don't have to be the captain, but you should probably learn some basic nautical terms. This is especially important for an Alaska cruise. Oftentimes, announcements will be made for wildlife sightings and during glacier viewing. Knowing starboard side versus port side will ensure you don't miss out on anything. Port side refers to the left side of the ship when facing forward. An easy way to remember that is port has 4 letters, as does left. Starboard is the right-hand side of the ship when facing the front, and fortunately, I don't have any good tips on how to remember that. But now, when you hear there's been a whale spotted on the starboard side of the ship, you can just grab your gear and you know exactly where to go. Now, of course, if you still need some more help planning your Alaska cruise, we have you covered, along with several Alaska cruise reviews for cruise lines like Norwegian Cruise Line, Princess, and All America Line here on our channel. We also have our complete Alaska cruise planning guide. There, we give you more details on things such as how to pick the right ship, how to pack for your Alaska cruise, as well as guidance on how to make the most of your time on board the ship and ashore. Our Alaska cruise planning guide video is the best next step to help you plan the perfect Alaska cruise.